For me personally, sitting in silence is the most natural state of being. That's when you are your most true self, and you can really observe those things. I've heard others speak of trying to meditate, as if they're really doing something and an activity and forcing it. But that's not necessarily the way to go about it. You allow those things to happen, but just be the observer of it all. There's a kind of a Zen saying that I refer back to often: leave your front door and your back door open, allow your thoughts to come and go, just don't serve them tea. I have many friends, veteran first responder community. I feel like most of the world could probably benefit from having a meditative practice in their life. And it's a pretty major shift in your perspective, but it's a very simple thing. And it kind of all goes back into how do you identify what your sense of self? Do you identify with the body itself? Do you identify with the thoughts? For me personally, sitting in silence is the most natural state of being. That's when you are your most true self, and you can really observe those things. I've heard others speak of trying to meditate, as if they're really doing something and an activity and forcing it. But that's not necessarily the way to go about it. You allow those things to happen, but just be the observer of it all. There's a kind of a Zen saying that I refer back to often: leave your front door and your back door open, allow your thoughts to come and go, just don't serve them tea. Right. And so you're sitting
Yes.
there and you're just more watching the waves of activity rather than identifying with it. So,
Let's move forward with that to talking about the identity and recalibrating the identity, because that's really what you have done through this process, right? And you have identified with being somebody that meditates. That's part of your identity, part of your belief system that you used to not have. Now you have. And that's really important to be able to develop that. Now, from a brain based perspective, let's get back to talking about how the brain processes your identity, because in order to cultivate a new one, you've got to have an understanding of what it is, because most people think that your identity or your personality is fixed. And in reality, it is the neural architect of your brain, right? That's how you perceive yourself. You believe yourself to be is your identity. So to be able to expand on that, you've got to form a new elevated identity. Now, you don't have to be suffering or transitioning to do that. You can just claim that you want to elevate your identity or your level of leadership, right? That we had talked about this before, Robert, about if you want to be an exceptional leader, you sure as hell better be embodying that. That has to be on your to-do list. Like you've got to bring it to the forefront of your brain. You can't just think it's going to happen. Now, let me just add a couple other areas of the brain I think we should discuss, because I know that the new paradigm is a lot of amygdala and prefrontal cortex.
yeah,
We've got
yeah.
two parts now. So I'm going to throw in a couple other parts here because it's important. And one is the anterior cingulate cortex. Now, this is the mediator of your brain. This determines the conflict between thoughts and emotions, physiological changes. Now, trauma or chronic stress is going to change that area. And that's linked to the insula, which is the interoception center. And that's your ability to feel your bodily internal sensations, what we call emotions, right? Now, most people in military and first responders, you're so trained to detach from emotions so you can do your job, right? But
Yep.
from a brain-based perspective, that means you've changed the function and the structure of those areas of your brain. Now, what you want to do is develop a sophisticated, integrated brain, right? You've got to expand your brilliance. You can't allow it to just be fragmented. And that's what happens. Now, you've tapped into it because of the meditation. Now, there's many other ways. But I want to highlight that when you change your identity or when you lose your identity, whether from a retirement or whatever the transition is, that those two areas are going to signal significant amount of pain and suffering because you're no longer aligned with the identity that you thought you were, which is why I'm emphasizing on, you've got to take it higher. You've got to continue to create an integrated brain and elevate yourself with more sophistication. Now, for some reason, I don't know why this is, but I know in the badass motherfuckers like you guys, tough, you can't get any tougher. I'm always like, you guys have maxed out the toughness, okay? But sophistication, like that doesn't seem to be on the table. So let's put that on the table, right? There's a bit of a proudness that you're still like, knuckleheads. I keep hearing like this, like Neanderthal, right? You're not Neanderthal. Like, no, like that's there's nothing admirable about being that. So let's step that level up and start elevating. And especially I'm speaking to alpha males because you guys are so needed. You're running the show. We need you to elevate. We need you to evolve. Society needs you. We're counting on you to continue the leadership, right? Because the alphas really are running it in many, many ways. And this goes for anybody, but speaking to that toughness, the mental toughness, which you have maxed out, and that's admirable. But now we're going into much more sophisticated state of being. And I think that's what's important. Okay. Well, let me give you, it's called a protocol called the identity recalibration. Now, I wrote a little bit about this in my book, right? But this is much more advanced. So I have multiple layers of more advanced training that I just haven't released yet. But I want to give you this because there's four steps to it. And if you just did this, like telling you, change your life. Now, step one is to define your new identity. It is a role you're going to embody. Now, I'm going to suggest most of you listening are take the outlier role, take the leadership role. You can be an athlete. There's no limit to that title that you take, but you have to have one. Your brain has to be able to focus on a new identity, a name of something. And then step two, choose 3 words, adjectives to describe that role, right? It can't be like, I'm just going to be an outlier now or a leader. No, what kind of leader? Are you exceptional? Are you elevated? Are you courageous? Are you playful? Are you joyful? 3 words. 3 words, not 2 words, not 1 word, 3 words. Because you're going to encode that sequence into your brain, into new neural pathways. Then step 3, you're going to challenge the belief that you have about becoming that identity. So maybe your brain's going to start spitting fire like, oh, you're never going to become an outlier. You're never going to become an elite athlete. You're never going to do that. Like it's just lies and lies and lies. So you've got to state, I believe this about that identity. And then the 4th stage is to encode a new command. You've got to tell your brain to answer a why-based question. Why am I becoming this identity? Why am I becoming an outlier? Why am I becoming an outstanding father? Why am I doing this? Your brain is programmed to close that loop, that predictive loop. It will give you the answer if you hold it accountable. And we talked about this before, is that your soul, what I call your soul, your conscious self, is the commander of your brain. It has the ability to tell your brain what the hell it should be focusing on. You cannot allow your brain to focus on whatever it wants to because, like I said, it will take you down the path of fuckery, right? That's the path of what your brain will do to you unless you have control over it. So once you have those 4 steps in place, That's how you have an opportunity to start to rewire your brain to become that person in advance. And now there's no limit. There's no limit. Like you can just be like one thing. You're just you're a veteran. Oh, please tell me that's not your only identity. Like, let's elevate from there, right? There's so many more choices that you could choose, right? The most difficult, of course, for most people is an outlier because you have to be willing to go against the norm. And that is a threat to the brain. So you've got to choose things that make you break a sweat a little, because that shows that you're outside your comfort zone. Like, you can't choose something that you already think you're pretty good at, right? You're like, well, no,
Yeah.
no, you need to push yourself.